What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Healthspan Academy. I'm your host, Craig Shearhart, and joining me today is my special guest, Justin Cotler, who is an elite coach in the world of CrossFit. And we're going to talk about that stuff. We're going to talk about his own kind of habits. He started his academic career with an undergrad from University of Pennsylvania. And then pretty much since then, he's just been making people crazy fit. He's the owner of CrossFit Dynamix. He's a founder, head coach, and head programmer of Underdogs Athletics, which carries some heavy hitters in the world of CrossFit. He's currently the USAFF national team head coach. He's the coach of the two-time National Grid League champion DC Brawlers. He was 2014 Grid League Coach of the Year, and he's been coach of multiple CrossFit Games athletes, including Danielle Brandon, Bethany, Shadburne, and podium finisher Kari Pearce. And we'll talk a little bit about that, what's life's like for his athletes, and all that good stuff. Justin, good to see you, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me, man. Pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I want to start the conversation with how your own kind of athletics kind of developed. I find it's such a broad spectrum when people are really good coaches, what kind of athletic background they have themselves. So talk about what athletics were like growing up for you and fitness and all that stuff and how you kind of spun into it.
Yeah, for sure. As far back as I can remember, sport in general was a huge part of my life. Mm-hmm. I loved all sports. As a kid, I played everything. From tennis to basketball to soccer to golf, etc. And it was cool because where I lived, like my neighborhood, I grew up in South Florida. So I was born in Miami, and I grew up in a little town called Hollywood, Florida, just in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Nice.
And in our neighborhood, we had a ton of kids that were my age. So we were just literally outside. You know what I mean? Outside all day long, especially down in Florida. You can be outside year round. I know, bro.
Yeah.
So we were outside year round, and we were just playing sports.
Awesome.
Kind of depending on the season. In a sense, like whatever we were watching on TV. So if it was football season, we're playing football. If it was basketball season, playing basketball. If it was baseball season, we were playing baseball. Yeah. So we didn't have a hockey team down in South Florida at that time, so there was no hockey. Yeah, I know, man. So I started, at a very young age, playing all sports, and there were a lot of very good athletes in my neighborhood. So I feel like we were constantly pushing each other, and I came from a very competitive household. So it was something that from a very young age, I was extremely competitive, and sports played a huge part of my life as a child, and kind of. Once I settled on a specific, and I settled on two sports, which were basketball and golf. And
vastly different sports. I like that.
Yeah. But if you know, like there are a lot of high level basketball players who are phenomenal golfers.
Oh yeah. Excluding Barkley, I guess. But
yeah. But apparently he's fixed his swing from what I've heard. Yes. Oh, man. I've heard the hitch is gone.
Well, it couldn't have got any worse.
It was awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those two, and I played at a very high level in high school, and then I was recruited to college to play basketball.
Oh, cool.
Because golf was always really a hobby, and then it's funny is golf was always a hobby because I didn't play competitively in high school. I just was pretty good, but I was really focused on basketball.
Okay.
And I had a really serious knee injury when I was 15 years old. Pretty catastrophic knee injury. And while I was able to recover, it really my knee was never really the same.
Was it ACL or?
Oh, it was worse. I had a tibial tuberosity compound fracture.
Oh man.
So essentially, I had a condition called Osgood-Schlatter as a kid, and it weakened the growth plate.
Right.
Where the tibia meets the patella tendon.
Yeah.
Which tibial tuberosity. So that tibial growth plate, in 0.0001% of all cases, it weakens that area so much that when you jump, when your quad contracts, and the patella tendon has to stretch.
Right.
Well, it just yanked the tibial tuberosity.
Pulled
it right off, and it went in and just cut everything up. So essentially, almost like inside, kind of disconnected everything.
Oh, man.
So this was at 15, and it just happened. I went up, actually, like kids do. I just went up to jump and hang on the rim, and when I jumped, everybody heard this huge pop, and so I just kind of fell.
Those are like the most worrisome injuries when there's no contact, when you're
oh yeah. And all my friends, were laughing. They thought I slipped, right? Because they didn't realize. And then I looked down at my knee and my foot was going this way and I was facing that way.
That's not what you want to see.
No, it was really bad. And so I had started varsity in high school as a freshman.
Yeah.
And was getting a lot of looks from some big colleges, some big universities here in the States. Michigan State was one from what I remember, and University of Miami, a few others. But pretty much overnight, I had to learn. So that whole year, that was my sophomore year and my sophomore season in high school. I had to learn how to walk again. So I had to basically construct my schedule at school to do half days, so then I could go to rehab 5 days a week and for 6 months to essentially learn how to do everything over again. Wow. So the knee was never quite the same, and I think it affected me a little bit. And then in high school, I could get away with it because I was better than most people.
Yeah.
But then when I got to college, though, at that time, University of Pennsylvania,
everybody's a monster.
Oh man, and we had two guys who actually our two guards, when I got there, they both went on to the NBA and had long careers. Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
So, my freshman year in college, I learned very quickly that, I had been a big fish in a small pond, and now I'm a small fish in a small pond. So it's funny is that and then I switched to golf. I was like, well, maybe I'm pretty good. Let me give it a try. And by the end of my career at University of Pennsylvania, I was captain of the golf team. So I switched from basketball to golf.
That's an amazing pivot.
It was pretty cool. So I see you have some guitars back there. I was a musician as well. I was a recording artist.
Yeah,
so
I saw it in your bio.
Yeah. That was actually, so when I got out of school, I got out of college, I was going to either turn pro in golf or become a recording artist. And I was a better singer. So I went the recording artist route for a while, which was awesome. But sports in general played such an enormous part of my life, on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, even when I was doing music, I was constantly, playing sports and fitness and working out. I got really into strength and conditioning as a high school athlete, where not so much at our high school, because there was, at that time, you're talking the 90s, there was very little.
Nothing there.
Nothing. No. But I was very lucky to have a connection to Bill Ferran, his son now, I think, is the strength coach of the Miami Heat. But at the time, he was a strength coach of the Miami Heat. He's a Hall of Fame strength coach. And he was essentially taking on some of the best high school athletes in South Florida, who would get together. We would literally go to his garage. We would train. I learned, how to squat correctly, how to clean correctly, how to understand a little bit more about nutrition. And I was a skinny kid, so, trying to gain a little bit of weight. And, so it was very cool to have that background and really, that was the first time that I even thought about that stuff, other than let's just go play basketball, it was like, okay, well, what are the other things that I can do to make me stronger and faster and this and that? So that was the first time that I had any, that I had any knowledge or understanding of it.
Right.
And
that's sort of what led into CrossFit, because kind of the functional fitness.
I don't know, man. I will say that it at least gave me a great understanding of it. Right. But no, I think what led more into it was just that I was kind of at a crossroads in my life when I found CrossFit. I had been in the music industry for 10 years, and I was at that time, I like to say, I started out in the music industry as this wide-eyed kid who, had these unbelievably big dreams. And 10 years later, I had to experience the roller coaster ride of the industry. And I was just a beaten, bitter artist at that time. And so I essentially was at a crossroads where I was living an extremely, I would say, hard existence. And when I say hard, like I was living hard, habits wise. No sleep. I was staying up till all nights. I mean, it was, and my body paid for it. And I got extremely sick and I had to build my body back. And the way that I did that, one of my buddies who was, was an actor in New York, because was living in New York at the time. He was really, really big into fitness. He was a personal trainer, and he and I started geeking out on functional fitness. We started geeking out on, CrossFit.com at the time, Jim Jones. There was a whole bunch of stuff that we started getting into, and it led to us coaching a class at a Globo gym in 2008 we were only allowed to coach it at midnight. It was called Midnight Madness because the owners didn't believe in CrossFit, but they saw that people were flocking to us. So they were like, well, we're not going to let you do this.
To this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like to say we were still dealing with people who thought the world was flat. So we were allowed to coach this class on Thursday nights, but that was really my, that was my first, my first kind of
exposure,
jump diving. And, it was more than exposure. I just fucking dove in, you know what I mean? Like I was just straight, like,
I'm all in, baby. Yeah.
I'm all in.
That's awesome.
And I think that happens, right? I think there's that mentality with CrossFitters too, especially those who are competitive. You know, it's kind of like not a half in, you're all in. You know what I mean? It's kind of diving into the deep end of the pool. And I look back at some of the stuff we did and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how we kill each other or kill the people that came to our class. Honestly, it was incredibly, a lot of it was extremely irresponsible programming, but trial and error. And from that, is kind of where and how my, the beginning of my CrossFit journey began.
Cool. That's awesome.
It was cool.
There's so many similarities in my own life, which I don't want to get into it now, but I had a serious knee injury right around the start of high school. My favorite sport was basketball. My best sport was baseball. That's the one I kind of like dipped my toes in university, but never really, I focused more on the gym stuff. So, and then music, same deal. I kind of like in my 20s, like took a stab at it. We did a bunch of shows, recorded an album and that stuff. And then stumbled back. Half the time I was supposed to be working on my PhD, I was like out rehearsing and and jamming, and it's just so much more fun than reading dissertations. But that's cool. So you jumped straight into coaching more or less as CrossFit, because like just having your background, is that more? Did you spend much time in classes, like learning from other coaches, or like you just kind of went straight to leading?
No, I did. So that guy who was one of my mentors for sure, his name is Steve Service, and Steve was incredibly knowledgeable, and we spent so much time together, coaching together, and then also training together. So so that was he was definitely a mentor. But when I started in CrossFit, and then it was really cool back then where when you would take you do the powerlifting cert, but it would be at Westside Barbell with Louis Simmons, right? You take the Olympic training, and it was with Mike Berkner, and it was so I got to learn from all these really cool dudes, and obviously with my background and learning from Bill Ferran, who was this incredible strength coach as well, and so it was a little bit of both, right? It was it was the study, but then without question, it was kind of diving in and coaching, and I was competing a little bit, but I was already I would say kind of on the tail end of my athletic career. I'd spent most of my 20s and my early 30s doing music. So I only competed, got a chance to compete 1 year at regionals. And I was already coaching a team and coaching an individual at the games and doing this and doing that and trying to compete. And it was like, okay, I wanted the experience 1 year. I got it. It was a blast. That's awesome. But my focus was absolutely on coaching. It was also at the time I opened up my own box, and my wife and I opened up our box, and which was Dynamix Fitness, originally Dynamix Gym, and then CrossFit Dynamix, which was in 2011. And we had this, idea to create this amazing community gym, but I also wanted to create an elite competitor gym.
Right.
That was my, just because of my background.
Yeah. It's tough to do both. It's tough to please everybody.
Extremely. Yeah. At the time, New England was really the only game in town, CrossFit New England. And when we came in, my goal was to kind of become the chief of the block, the bully on the block. And our second year in existence, we won the Northeast Regional, and then we run it again. And you know what I mean? So it was really cool, man. It was a blast. And I think back, it's crazy to me to think, 10 years ago and 9 years ago, kind of where we were, that, it was, I would say that was my first athlete that I coached at the games was in 2010. I was on that coaching team, but really like sinking my teeth into it, where I was the guy, and that was in 2012 and 13, 14. And then the grid league obviously happened. And that was, that was a huge step in building my chops as a coach and melding personalities and understanding programming and what it takes to motivate and all those things. That was awesome. And it's all kind of led me to where I am now, which is awesome.
That's amazing. So you kind of talked about some stuff that would make you cringe looking back if you saw the video. And I think we've all been through those moments as coaches early on, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to like prove yourself and you don't have as much like genuine confidence. So you're kind of faking it till you make it at times.
Yeah.
What are the biggest changes in your coaching style today compared to back then? What do you think has been the most, biggest take home learning experience that you actually put into place nowadays?
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
No, honestly, so if you've seen Underdogs programming, it's pretty straightforward and it's relatively simple. I think back to the stuff that we were programming, it was essentially, you were just trying to outdo everything, right? Yeah. They'd make it incredibly complicated and hard and all these other things.
Yeah.
So the biggest things for me, and obviously there's no substitute for experience, but over the years, I always come back to keeping it simple. There's certain things that, as a CrossFit athlete, you have to be able to do. And there's certain things that we constantly see in competition.
Right.
And if you're not covering your bases there, then what are you doing? And so ultimately there were two big ones. The one of them was that, when you first start out, you kind of want to prove that you know everything. Yeah. And once you accept the fact that you don't, and that was a big thing.
People can actually recognize that. And there's a difference in saying like, making something up and shrugging your shoulders versus, hey, that's a good question. Let me figure that out for you.
Right.
Like
absolutely.
That kind of mentality.
And I talked about this with Max Hod from Training Think Tank. When we were at the games in 2020, in the second stage where there was only 10 athletes and 10 coaches, and we were in the bubble together. And it was really cool to be there at that time, because it was just, it was so special. We knew that this would probably never happen again. That there's 5 women, 5 men, it's the elite of the elite with their coaches, and we're all together and we're able to share this experience. And he asked me that question about like, what's the biggest difference, and it was actually, it was Chandler was there at the time. He was on the demo team, and Chandler asked us, what's the biggest difference between you now as a coach and then? And I said, honestly, it's listening.
Yeah.
Like back then you think you know everything, you don't listen. And now I have incredibly, I have this daily dialogue with my athletes, where I don't know everything, and programming is an ever evolving process. There's no perfect program.
Exactly.
So if I'm not listening and analyzing and taking it and tweaking things, then I'm not a very good coach. And, so for me, it was kind of letting the ego go and listening to my athletes, because you can't treat everyone the same. Can't program for everyone the same.
Yeah.
So there's times when, as a coach, you really need to sit back and listen and assess. And then from there you can, I like to say, if you want to play jazz a little bit, then that's fine. You can ad lib, but it's not that constant, where you're just, okay, I'm here and what I say goes and I'm not listening, that doesn't work,
I agree.
So that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You can like memorize the entire scientific literature on strength and conditioning, but that doesn't make you an expert in the athlete, right? So that's
absolutely,
like, they're an expert in themselves, and you have to rely on that to get the best out of it.
And I say that all the time to people. And obviously, like, knowledge is obviously incredibly important. You have to have a basic understanding of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
But like, if you're coaching out of a book, you're not going to be a successful coach.
Yeah. You can't just coach statistically what works. It has to be what's going to work for that athlete. 100%. So let's talk a little bit about that dynamic when you're working with the games athletes. Do you have a portion where there's like a core programming and everybody's doing that stuff, and then they have their weaknesses on the side? Is that generally how it works? And you customize bits and pieces, or how does that work? Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically how we do things. But if I see that something's not working for someone, specifically, then we'll break off of that path a bit. Or if I know that I have an athlete who has a history of, injury problems, and that might stem from a different sport. And most of those honestly have been gymnastics. So it's been athletes who were extremely, extremely high level gymnasts who come into CrossFit and they have,
hypermobility.
They have lower back disc issues, from compression, compression injuries over the years. A lot of ankle injuries. So really, really poor mobility actually in their ankles because of constant, tearing ligaments and absolutely. Yeah. So we see all these things and there are a few of my athletes who are extremely high level, right? Like Bethany, for instance, who's on a completely different program than everybody else.
Okay.
And that's simply because, if we put her on the same program as Kari, she would break down. Kari is the type of athlete who she's really the only one I've ever had who I had to beg to deload. Like she just
seems tough as nails.
It's crazy, dude. Yeah. But her body too, it would just withstand whatever, like you didn't, where most athletes aren't like that. Right. And they're usually somewhere in that 8 to 12 week cycle that they're going to then have to deload it. But somebody like Bethany, and she'll readily admit this, she deloads every 4 weeks. Like it's religious. Yeah. We push a little bit ahead and then we deload. And then, and then we take a slight step back and then we start her from there. And then we try to push a little bit further. Yeah. And that's fine. It works for her. And that's the way that we can keep her healthy, and so it's a little bit different for everybody, but yes, generally speaking, I'd say 90%, during the year, right, following similar strength program, following the same type of, metcons and monostructural work, but then we'll tweak the skill work a little bit differently depending on what their needs are.
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to do it. You still have a little bit of a sense of community where people are together, maybe submitting scores, comparing to each other, but able to dive into their own kind of.
And that's exactly why, right? Like we've created this athlete camp in Vegas, and if I've got 15 athletes all doing something different, then why are they here?
Yeah,
right. Like we're essentially, we've created a community where these athletes can constantly level up, and they're training together and they're pushing each other, and it's great competition. It's not even good competition; it's great competition. And so it wouldn't make sense, if there weren't a lot of similarities in the program, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. But so you can obviously bias the core stuff if you try to specialize too much, and you really need everyone to benefit from it. So I think that's probably the cleanest way to keep it. You talk about like deloading and obviously like injury prevention has got to be number one or at the very top of the priority list for at least hopefully for most of these athletes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're like, do you talk them through the long-term processes as well, or are you just basically just throwing them stuff week to week? Or are you saying like, do you have athletes that need to know the process of, this is why we're deloading here, and this is for like to peak at this time of the year? Or do you talk them through that?
So there'll be some athletes who want to know that, right? Yeah. So we'll discuss that and we'll go through the process of it. And we'll say, hey, look, this is what we're doing this cycle, or you know what I mean? Yeah. And this is kind of where we want to peak, et cetera. Right. And then there are some athletes that they don't care, right?
Just give me the sheet of paper and let me go.
And I think at this point, I feel pretty lucky about it, but I feel like I've established,
you've earned that trust.
Exactly. And trust is the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. So like they look at me and they like, listen, and it's huge, man. And I talk about this all the time. It's like they're putting, what they hold the most dear in their lives, like their career. They're putting it in your hands, right? And that level of trust, it's not something that I take lightly.
Right.
And I think that they understand that. And so, some of them are just like, just point me in this direction. Give me what I need to do. I trust you. And if there's ever a question, obviously I'm going to answer it. But it just depends. I think, some people are going to be a little bit more analytical and some people are going to need a little bit more information. And then some people are just like, I wake up in the morning. I want to see my program. I want to do it. And then I want to shut it off. Right. And then I'm just going to, do what I do the rest of the day type of thing with my mental prep and my recovery and my sleep and stuff like that. So it depends a little bit on the athlete.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually just talking with Pat Vellner yesterday, and that seems like his frame of mind is just, Michelle, just give me my stuff. I don't want to know why.
That was like Kari.
You just,
That was Kari. Yeah. She just wanted to, it was kind of like, okay, give me what I need, coach.
And I get it.
And I'll go do it.
Yeah. If you got a ton on your plate, if you got anything beyond competing as CrossFit on your plate, I get just wanting to have that just thrown at you and just no questions asked. Let's just do it. Yeah. Fair enough. So when we get in, do you also, how far do you go into detail with the program? Do you program recovery and mobility as well? Or is that kind of left to their own devices? Do they kind of like, is that a feel out process based on the athlete, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we talk about that obviously. And if someone needs help with it, then obviously we will provide them with suggestions. And also I've developed over the years a lot of really good relationships with, nutrition experts, registered dietitians, et cetera, mindset specialists, this and that. So I always talk about myself kind of like a project manager. That's the way I see myself as a coach. No, really, I'm a generalist, and I feel like I'm very good at a lot of things. And if someone, but if I can bring in people who are better than me at a specialty, then I'm going to bring them in. I have no ego when it comes to that. The athletes come to me, to help them reach their maximum potential. And if I can bring in people who are better than me at specific things, then that's what we're going to do. And I feel like that's what we're doing at Underdogs, where, we'll work with people, I have a conditioning expert, right? Like, who writes our monostructural conditioning.
Right.
Sometimes we'll work with a weightlifting coach. Sometimes we'll work with a few of the athletes. They've got their own personal nutritionists, right? They've got a mindset coach. Now, obviously, I feel very solid in all those aspects. But
you can't wear all the hats for everybody.
No, I can't. I just don't have the bandwidth, right? And we talk about programming and coaching. I also have a young family. I've got kids. I've got a wife. It's
balance. Got to give at some point.
So it's understanding, what you're the best at, and then bringing in the people to be able to help you and to help shape and mold everybody. So really, that's one of the things that we do is if someone needs help in a specific area, we'll guide them in the right direction to make sure that they're getting what they need.
Right.
That's what we focus on.
That's, I think, what anybody would want to coach is like, know your limits. And when somebody needs something beyond that, know where to ask, right? That's as much as you can ask for.
You look at most professional teams, right? And most professional organizations, they've got a head coach, but then they've got assistant coaches, right? You've got your offense trainers, coordinator, defense surgeons, coordinator,
team. Yeah, for sure. The whole spectrum. I think CrossFit's a little bit behind where those sports are, but I think it's good to see it going in that direction, right? Where you don't have coaches that think that they have to do everything, and it's got to be a team effort. So,
and it's going that route for sure. And I think we've seen that now with the different, the different athlete camps that are, kind of taking the forefront around the world. And there are some phenomenal ones, and I feel very lucky, to be that Underdogs is getting the visibility and being spoken about in, with some of those really phenomenal, other programs and camps. So we're just, we're trying to do the best for our athletes. And I think all the camps are.
The proof's in the pudding, man. You can't fake those standings. It's obviously working. Man. So let's talk. So you kind of alluded to how this evolved. Let's talk about that in terms of game structure. I want to hear your take on, it's been kind of all over the map. There was the train wreck, so to speak, back in like 2018, where everything everything changed in a blink of an eye.
19.
Right. So how do you see the current structure compared to, like, how do you, if you were to design the games, do you think we've got it nailed now? Do you think it was better when it was back in a kind of regional setting? What do you think is ideal from a coaching and athlete standpoint?
So I've been pretty outspoken, that it's really not my favorite.
As is?
Yeah, it's not my favorite. And I think
it all
stems from the fact that I think we have to figure out a way to create a season where the biggest events and the biggest money making events are in the season, so that we have an off season. And the problem is now is that, you've got 4 stages with the open and quarters and semis and the games. Mm-hmm. And then we've got no off season because your big money making events, when the athletes can actually, are all happening between October and January.
Yeah, so true.
Where everybody should be recovering. And so that we can create longevity in the sport for our athletes, where their shelf life is higher, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's hard, man. And I understand that it's a challenging thing, for CrossFit to figure out, but we have to figure out a way for our best athletes, our elite athletes, to be able to make the bulk of their money within a specific period of time and not have it be year round, because we're just going to destroy our athletes.
Yeah.
And you talk about athlete health and athlete longevity, as being the number one priority. And for me, it absolutely is. But second to that is athletes having opportunities to make a living and be athletes.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for the good of the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, it's how do we create a system that takes those two things, as A and B, or 1 and 2. Yeah. And right now we don't have it, and that to me is, that to me is unacceptable. And it's something that we need to work towards. And I'm not sure that we are. I think right now it's the system that works the best for CrossFit. It's not the system that works the best for the athletes.
Yeah.
And what I will say is I'm encouraged, at least, by the communication and the open line of communication that I've seen now with the new regime that's in place.
Yeah.
I was on one of the PFAA calls with Brent and a few of the other athletes. Yeah. And we were talking, kind of about the different topics and the different things that he's trying to accomplish and what he's bringing to CrossFit. And we talked about how much more open they are to listening. And that's the first step, right? Because if you're constantly getting pushed back and they don't want to listen, then nothing's going to get accomplished.
For sure.
But there are a lot of things that we need to fix. And I think, I think the setup of the season, bigger money making events, et cetera, those are 2 really big ones. And it's going to take time, man. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I understand that. But if we don't talk about it, if it's not an open conversation, and if the athletes aren't the ones that are really pushing that, then it's never going to happen. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have athletes, you don't have a sport.
Yeah. And it's just become this bigger elephant in the room. So I guess at some point, either these other events have to kind of like blow up to get to where the games are. And I don't, that's probably going to take 20 years before they kind of reach prestige status of the games, where it's almost like tennis or golf, where there's a series of tournaments throughout the year and you kind of pick when you compete, otherwise having this kind of set strategies. So I think they have to pick and choose that direction, but it would be interesting to see what comes of it. But I think you don't get there without talking about it, like you said.
No. Yeah. There has to be that communication. There has to be dialogue. And I see that it's starting to happen, which is great. It's taken a long time, but it does look like it's happening. So hopefully, man, we're gonna see, some significant changes, I think, over the next few years. I hope so. And I hope we have, a direction that really moves towards creating, athlete longevity and creating money-making opportunities for these athletes.
Yeah, for sure. So, and we've seen some positive direction. I think even just how affiliates are managed now, and you probably noticed that as well. Just the communication seems better. There's kind of more resources and stuff like that. We just actually re-affiliated. We de-affiliated back just in 2020 and all the shit hit the fan, and we just we're back on board now. So I've been impressed, but there's been a lot of turnover. What was your take on that turnover, starting with Glassman and most recently like Castro, like, do you feel like the decisions are sound, heading in the right direction? Do you have a good feeling about where they're going?
It's a mixed bag for me.
Yeah.
I felt very good about, the change obviously at the top, with what happened with Greg, and it was just time. Obviously, I think at that point, I was like, this guy's going to write a book on how to destroy $1 billion brand overnight. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You built it, and now you've destroyed it. But ultimately, I have mixed feelings about what happened with Dave. Dave and I didn't have the greatest history, but over the last few years, it felt like got along a lot better. And for the betterment of the sport, Dave was very set in his ways, and I think you're seeing that there's a lot better communication right now with who's in place. But I would love to know what the plan is. Yeah. I'm not sure that any of us really understand who's guiding the ship right now, right? Like, what's going on? You know? I mean, I don't know that any of us really know what's going on, and I think that's twofold. I think we don't really know, like, CrossFit the brand and CrossFit the sport. I think right now both of them, it's very nebulous.
They're just up in the air. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be some clarification there. I think we need to really. I think we need some guidance. We need to understand we need to get some communication that kind of says, okay, guys, this is where we're going. This is the plan. Yeah. Because I'm not sure that any of us really understand right now. I don't
think so either. Actually, I just had my affiliate, like onboarding meeting on Zoom. And I, just out of curiosity, I typed in if they had any other questions, and I asked if anybody knows who's programming the Open, and it was just crickets. They were just like, wasn't hearing a response. So it's an unknown at this point.
It is. And unfortunately, that doesn't leave many of us who, this is how we make a living, most of us. So for me, it's a little bit uneasy, to not really understand what the direction is, and because there has to be a plan, I would think, I mean, but I don't know what it is. So I'm hoping to sit down, this year and with some of the people in charge. I mean, I guess we don't really know right now who's in charge as far as on the methodology side, right?
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
CrossFit HQ side. But I have a pretty good relationship with Justin Berg, and I'd like to sit down and ask some of those questions and see. Yeah. He's a smart guy, so I'd like to know kind of what that direction is going to be, and but hopefully that will flush itself out over the next few months. I mean, I really hope so, because I think it would make a lot of us feel a lot better and easier,
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully they're learning from past mistakes and whatnot. Yeah. Justin, I want to circle back to your own habits. Obviously, when you're training athletes, you can be pulled in a million different directions, and you mentioned a family life, and we're still in the tail end of a pandemic. Sometimes hard to prioritize your own health. What is the top of your list right now in your own health and fitness, and what do your habits look like around that?
Really is trying to find the time to train myself, honestly. I obviously understand now that where I'm at in my life, it's really more about maintenance. It's really more about longevity. Yeah. And getting my body to feel good. I have a lot of sports injuries over the years. So there are things that I deal with, I have osteoarthritis in both my knees, and my left knee, especially, that I know eventually is probably going to have to be replaced. Oh, man. But you know what, though? I think a lot of athletes deal with that, right? I mean, and I, especially like when you've had catastrophic injuries. I've had 3 left knee surgeries. I've got hardware in there, I've no bone on bone, et cetera.
Oh, man.
But it's being able to, I still credit CrossFit with keeping me strong and keeping me functional. And I get to do a lot of things that I want to do. I have really young kids. My daughter and I, one of the big things that we do, she's a phenomenal athlete. She's an incredible rock climber, and the two of us climb a lot. Cool. So that's one of the big things that I love to do. But honestly, it's trying to be diligent, and I'll be the first to admit, with the athletes that I coach, with running a business, especially Underdogs, which is growing, at kind of light speed, and with with having a family, and I've got 2 kids that are under the age of, well, one's 5 and the other one will be 2 in a month. Yeah. And without my wife, none of it would be possible. I mean, she's incredible, but the 2 of us, both of us is really trying to find time, for us. And like, so even if it's 30 minutes, going down and putting something together that, we have a little home gym outside here in Vegas and, in our backyard. So going down there for 30 minutes and doing a 30-minute EMOM, with conditioning and some weightlifting accessory work, et cetera. But trying to find that 30 minutes to an hour daily, where you're able to
carve it out,
you have to, I mean, it's also just as far as stress relief is concerned. For
sure. 100%.
But one of those things that's the toughest, and I think any parent will tell you that is also sleep, oh my gosh, it's just, I feel like sleep has been incredibly difficult since, especially with 2 young kids, and, some nights you get it and some nights you don't. And that's just part of the deal, that you do the best that you can. But, prioritizing that is huge. So that's the deal, man, is as a father, and then as a coach and as a business owner, I think just trying to find the time to be able to prioritize your training a little bit. And then obviously trying to get enough sleep is huge.
Yeah. Fair enough. Awesome. Well, Justin, I appreciate the time, man. It's been a great chat. Awesome. Learning
Thanks,
more
brother.
about how your operations work.
I appreciate it.
Best
Craig.
of luck with the season. Best of luck to your athletes, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Craig.
Thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time on Healthspan Academy. Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. This has been a fun project. We're growing in viewership every single week, and we obviously couldn't do that without you. So thank you for continuing to tune in. I really hope you're getting value out of the programming and the content. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I've been working on a book on health and longevity the last couple of years, been collaborating with my colleague, Dr. Dan Vitale, who's an expert in the field as well. And we've basically just kind of summarized the literature, some of the techniques that we found really useful in the world of biohacking, what our exercise regimen looks like, what's, cardio type stuff is going to help us live longer and healthier, mobility work, nutrition. We've covered the whole spectrum, everything that you can basically be in control of in your health and fitness kind of moving forward to help you live as healthily as possible for as long as possible. And it's available free for download. So if you click on the YouTube banner, you'll see a link to download the blueprint. It's also on our Instagram profile or on the website. You can click on 5pillarmethod.com/optimize to get your free copy of the book. And I hope you enjoy it. Hope you're keeping well. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.